Voices of the Sunbelt continues. Dave Riggert from the James Madison Dukes hops on Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Thanks for hopping on. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, 2023-2024 was an outstanding season for the James Madison Dukes, from the football team to the basketball team, baseball team. It was a great year, and now there's some turnover. Curt Cignetti moved on. Basketball has a new coach, and they have a new athletic director. But the winning is still expected, and they have brought in a winner, Bob Chesney, to do such as that. We bring in Dave Riggert. We'll talk about Bob Chesney taking over. Actually, the football coach and the basketball coach was hired before the new AD. Of course, they lost a lot of players in the transfer portal. Who is the starting quarterback, as we always ask, and what are those 2024 expectations? We bring in the voice of the James Madison Dukes. He's Dave Riggert on Locked On Sunbelt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. We're continuing our feature of Voices of the Sunbelt. We bring in my buddy, Dave Riggert, from the James Madison Dukes. Dave, lots of turnover with the Dukes, both, basketball and football. It feels like it's a new deal going on at JMU. How much fun has it been since you've been there? I mean, it seems like you arrived and they started winning.
I guess that's the common denominator, right? I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, it's been a while since I showed up, because obviously the first season I was doing games, they were in FCS, and that's when they announced that they were going to transition to FBS. The success that the football program has had, now what basketball did last year, and now you mentioned it, it's kind of a new era of JMU athletics in some sports. Like football, obviously, with Coach Chesney and his coaching staff and so many new players. Coach Spradlin on the basketball team, and he's got almost a new basketball team too, but I think they're going to be really good. And then Matt Roan comes in as new athletic director as well this year. Yeah. So there's tons of new at JMU, but the expectation stays really, really high around here, and they expect to come in and win right away.
So let's talk about that, because I think, were the coaches hired before the new AD was? Because that's a little bit out of order. That makes it a little tough for them, to be honest with you. But explain to us how that all went down.
Yeah, because Jeff Bourne was the previous AD here for 25 years, did an unbelievable job. And obviously, Coach Cignetti took the Indiana job after the season before the bowl game last year. So Jeff Bourne had to make a hire, and obviously he hired Coach Chesney. I think it's a home run hire from everything that we've seen so far. And then after the basketball season, making the NCAA tournament, getting to the second round, upsetting Wisconsin, losing to Duke in the second round. The next day when we got back to Harrisonburg, it's announced that Vanderbilt was going to hire Mark Byington. Right. So obviously there was not an AD in place at the time, so Jeff Bourne has to make one final hire in his 25-year tenure as athletic director at JMU. So he hires Preston Spradlin from Morehead State. I didn't think that's a home run hire as well. But honestly, it was funny because not long after that, it was probably 2 weeks after that when they hired Matt Roan, the AD, and he is unbelievably impressive. I've been able to get a close relationship with him. And I asked him flat out this summer, I go, okay, you didn't hire these two coaches.
That's right.
So talk about that relationship, and did you know about them? And honestly, he goes, those were hires that I was thinking of guys on my list, that all ADs have a list of guys, and they were on his list. Because again, being at the FCS level where he was at Eastern Kentucky, he knew about Bob Chesney. And then being in Kentucky, he knew about Morehead State and Preston Spradlin. So he had a relationship, not relationships, but he knew of those guys and how highly thought of they are in the business. So those are both guys that are very similar. And I think they're similar to Matt Roan too. So it's actually worked out almost better than anyone could have expected.
Yeah, that's as a direct question as you can ask the AD, because he has to be on their page, not the other way around to begin with, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to say he's stuck with them, but that's sort of, he has them. He inherits them. We're talking to Dave Riggert from the JMU Dukes, Voices of the Sunbelt, Locked On Sunbelt. All right, so let's talk Bob Chesney. So he was on my radar, and if people have been listening to Lockdown, they know I'm a Syracuse fan. So he was up for the Syracuse gig. For whatever reason, he didn't get that one. And all of a sudden, he found himself at JMU. And then all of a sudden, right after that, the Boston College job opened up really quickly. I mean, I know it's just all a bunch of internet stuff, but it was so much so that he had to come out with a statement that's saying, I'm staying at JMU. I mean, stuff moves fast these days, Dave.
It does. It does move fast. And there were some fans around JMU that were a little bit nervous that they had the guy that they wanted. I think a lot of people wanted Bob Chesney. They knew of his background and what he brought to the table. And then they got to know him a little bit too. And then all of a sudden the BC job opens up. He had been in Massachusetts for a long time in that area. So there was some talk, but it didn't last long. It was I think it was the next day after there was a lot of talk that Coach Chesney was possibly up for that job, that he came up and said, no, I'm good here. We just moved. We're good to go. And I love it here. So it squashed the talk pretty quick, but folks have fallen in love with Bob Chesney. And I think it's nothing against Coach Signetti or the former staff, but it's just a different way of doing things. Again, what Coach Signetti did was outstanding because obviously he won football games. So there's many ways to win football games, but Coach Chesney is so much more personable. He's out in the public. He's meeting everybody. Again, like I mentioned to you off the air, and I've mentioned this on my show, that I've got access to every single player on that roster. And it was not the case in the past. And it's just, again, that's the way of doing things. I get both sides of it. Coach Signetti would have about 10 guys that are available throughout the entire year that you could talk to. And he'd rotate through that 10 or 12 guys. But I've probably talked to 15, 20 guys already throughout camp right now. And I've got 6 more coming on the way here soon this week. So it's just a different way of doing things. Coach Chesney's practices are something that the new coaches that came from different places have never seen before. The players have never seen the types of practices that he's employed right now. So it's pretty impressive to see what they're doing. It's a brand new roster. They've flipped it. There's 58 new guys and 31 new transfers, but it's a much different dynamic from what they've had in the past with so many new guys and so many new coaches. A lot of new going on, but I have been impressed by what I've seen so far.
We got Dave Riggert on Lockdown Sunbelt from James Madison, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so let's talk about the Bob Chesney path to where he is, because I think he's been a head coach longer than some of these guys have been coaching. All right, and not Tim Beck. Tim Beck was coaching forever, but finally got his head coaching gig at Coastal Carolina. Jared Parker came up the assistant route as well, but has never been a head coach. Bob Chesney, hasn't been a head coach for like 11 years or something along those lines. Yeah. It could be longer, and it's just going to be interesting to see, the difference between a Bob Chesney with a head coaching experience compared to a Jared Parker, both entering the Sun Belt at the same time, both entering very successful programs, both basically having their programs turn over with the talent either running out of eligibility or moving on. And it'll be interesting to see how those two dynamics go, because the first time something happens that doesn't supposed to happen, Bob Chesney can say, well, that's happened to me before. Jared Parker's going to be like, all right, now I got to go back to what the other guy used to do. I think. I don't want to talk for Coach Parker and get me in trouble, but he just doesn't have that kind of experience yet, where Bob Chesney has over a decade of it.
And Coach Chesney's a guy that has really he's paid his dues to get to where he's at. And some coaches kind of are handed a job. I mean, you look at Deshaun Foster out at UCLA, and he's never been a head coach or a coach of any sort really before. So he gets handed a job. Well, Coach Chesney began at Division III, Salve Regina up in Newport, Rhode Island. He spent some time there, then was at Assumption College, a Division II school, and then he went to Holy Cross, an FCS school. So he goes Division III, Division II, FCS, and now he's in the FBS at JMU. So he has worked his tail off to get to where he's at. And he's rebuilt everywhere he's been. And the relationships that he builds is something that I've never seen before from a head coach. You see it from assistant coaches quite a bit, and you can see that from the previous staff here. But the relationships that he builds, he is going out of his way to make sure that he knows about all these players. The guys that did stay on this team, and there's, again, about half the team stayed from last year, he has gotten to know them. And they've even said to me, like, I mean, he got to know my family. He gets to know my background and everything like that. So he has a ton of experience in just the relationship building. And being a head coach, it's not easy when the bullets are flying and you've got it's different situations. But to have the experience, and I think it gets a bad rap. And maybe this is because I was at the Division II level for so long. But people at Division I level sometimes feel like people at Division II, Division III, they're not good enough. They aren't good enough, whether that's a coach, an AD, a radio voice, no matter what it is.
Oh.
But at those levels, you have to do so much more.
Yeah.
Division II, Division III, you have to work your tail off harder because you don't have the resources. So Coach Chesney's done that. And now he has some resources to work with at JMU that they didn't have at Holy Cross, Assumption, Salve Regina, that he can have at his disposal. So I think he's going to take off from here. And like I said, I think this is a home run hire. He has hit the ground running, and it's been pretty impressive to see what he's done.
Let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Dave Riggert, the voice of the James Madison Dukes. They brought in 58 new players, and how is everybody getting to know each other? We'll do that right after I tell you about Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League tickets. Told this story before at work for the Eastern Conference Finals of the NBA playoffs. We've surprised my nephew, the Samo, with Game 6 tickets to see the Pacers and the Knicks for his high school graduation gift. So it was pretty cool, and Game Time made everything extremely easy. Of course, you can get those last-minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. You get the zone deal. Save even more when you choose the section and let Game Time choose the seats. You get the seat views, that panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and you get the lowest price guarantee. Or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to it. We're doing the voices of the Sunbelt. We got Dave Riggert from the James Madison Dukes talking about how Bob Chesney is doing it differently than Curt Cignetti did. These guys got a lot of new guys. They got to learn. And Dave Riggert actually answering the question how they are trying to integrate and getting everybody to know each other. And on the staff-ish, a little bit of a surprise if you haven't heard, who is one of Bob Chesney's assistant coaches. He's Dave Riggert. He is the voice of the James Madison Dukes on Lockdown Sunbelt. We're talking to Dave Riggert from the JMU Dukes, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. I was just going to say he must think he's in heaven because all he has to do at JMU is coach football, recruit, and a little glad hand. He doesn't have to do laundry, doesn't have to drive a van, doesn't have to put the lines on the field, doesn't have to make sure you got officials. At those lower levels, you are doing everything and not being well compensated for it. Now, all he has to do is basically coach football and shake a few hands, and he's well compensated.
One cool story that's coming out of camp right now is that his dad, Bob Chesney Sr.
I saw this. This is great.
He was a longtime high school football coach and just a longtime coach. He's been in the business for over 50 years. And when Bob Chesney Jr., again, who is the head coach of the Dukes, when he got his first head coaching job at Salve Regina, Division III school, again, he got, I think he said he got like $40,000 or $50,000, whatever it was. But he had a pool of like $16,000 for like 7 or 9 coaches. So he got his brother and his dad to come coach. I don't know if he compensated them or not, but they came to coach with him. I think lived with them and everything. So since that point in time, and you mentioned it's been 11 years, he's had 3 different stops, Salve Regina, Assumption, and Holy Cross. Bob Chesney Sr. has come and been on his coaching staff. Now he's not getting paid, but he now is in Harrisonburg. He has rented a place for 4 months. He hopes it's longer, maybe 5 if they can get to a bowl game and do all that. But he has rented a place in Harrisonburg for 4 months, and he essentially is a coach. He's on the field. He's screaming at the guys. He's helping them. He's kind of talking about their technique. It's awesome to see him out there. I took a picture today at their practice, and Tyler Purdy, who came with Coach Chesney from Holy Cross, he's got his arm around him, and they're hugging each other. And the guys have really taken to him. The assistant coaches have taken to him. The administration is letting it happen. because they understand how valuable a resource he can be with over 50 years of coaching. But it's a cool story.
Well, he's probably the one guy that can talk to Coach Chesney and say, maybe we can do it a different way. Whereas,
maybe, I don't know.
He's the one guy who said, maybe we take a little bit different approach, depending on which way we want to go. We're talking to Dave Riggert from the James Madison Dukes, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so the big monkey in the room, I guess, on the back of JMU, you mentioned it. They're did you say 55 new guys?
58.
58 new players. A lot of those guys did go to, the ones who left went with Signetti to Indiana. What was the program like during the offseason? Because, again, not that he needs my defense, but Kurt was, a little bit older, and he's got to take the chance that he has. This was going to be his one chance.
For sure.
As someone who used to color his hair and now doesn't care about it, I think he colored his hair to make him look younger to get those jobs. So this is his last job, right? Basically, at Indiana. And so what was it like with all the players leaving and new players coming and going? Georgia State has a bunch. ULM has a bunch. Coastal has a bunch. The Cajuns didn't lose many and didn't get new players. But now we're finding out JMU 58 players. I mean, so how do you integrate those? Has the coach said, how do you integrate them? Usually they're integrating, 20 to 25 new players, and they're freshmen and they're not expected to play. Now they're transfers and they are expected to produce.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. Talking to a lot of the players and coaches, they really made it probably a big emphasis, especially during winter conditioning. They all wore their workout shirts. They had their last name on there just so everybody could learn everybody. I mean, that's like elementary type stuff, but it's true. And they've played the name game where they want everybody to get to know everybody. They want to know who everyone is, whether they're a new player, a returning player, it doesn't matter. So they have a game where they play the name game, and a coach will talk to whoever it is and be like, hey, the front row, name all those guys. And evidently the last week, Blake Kendall is a backup quarterback, and they went to Blake. He named every player on the roster. And
wow.
And talking to some of the guys that were on this team a year ago, they were very honest with me. They're just like, I bet you I could do the same thing. But last year, I couldn't. And that's a team that won 11 football games. Right. And in my estimation, was very connected. And those guys even thought so, but it was mainly offense and defense. Now it's the entire football team. So they've just done little things like that. They've gone on different little trips around town. They've made different groups hang out together, eat together. The new college football game obviously brings everybody together when they get to play that. But they've just done some elementary things so that everybody knows everybody. Because nowadays, they just don't. Even last year's team, Tanner Morse, who's been here 6 years, he goes, I didn't know probably a fourth of our team last year. I couldn't tell you their name, which is amazing to me. But I bet that's more common than it's not. You just don't hear about it. And he goes, offense and defense didn't really hang out. Now they're always hanging out, offense, defense. And the one thing that I see right now with this team that's different than any time I've ever seen is they communicate better than any team I have ever seen. And that is constant communication from the head coach and his staff to let them know, hey, we have to talk. We have to communicate. That's the way we're going to learn about each other and about how we play. I see offense and defense talking on the sidelines during practice. Hey, you could have done this when I tried this spin move, or hey, on that technique, you could have done this. There's so much more communication in this camp than I think I've ever seen in any time that I've been at any level of football, even at JMU. So they've done they went back kind of to elementary type stuff, but everybody knows everybody on this team, and that has got this team pretty connected with so many new guys coming in.
See, if I was Blake and I named every single one of the players on the team, I absolutely would have gone to either to Chesney, the offensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator, drop the mic and tell them, no, you do it.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, I think they could. I think they really could.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It's pretty amazing what they're doing.
That's impressive. Let's take one more time out. We'll wrap up our conversation with Dave Riggert of the James Madison Dukes on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Who's the starting quarterback for the Dukes? And what are those expectations with all of the turnover that has happened to the Dukes program? But first, we're almost at 1,400. All right, we got to get to 1,400 by next Monday. That's the goal. And then we'll see how close we'll get to the 1,500. I think we can do it. I think we're going to get closer than I originally thought. I didn't think we're going to get close to 1,500, but I think we're going to possibly do it. See what we can do in 2 weeks We're at 1380. I think we can get to 1400 by Monday, and then a little bit less than 2 weeks, we'll see if we can get to 1500 as the closer we get to college football. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe over on YouTube. Of course, you can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Listen to it on your way to work. Please don't look at your phone and drive at the same time. We don't want to lose any listeners. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Sunbelt. Also, don't forget, for your next listen, check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you do have others, ACC, Big Ten, the SEC, my guy, Chris Gordy, you can find it in Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, let's wrap things up with the voice of the James Madison Dukes. He's Dave Riggert. We talk about the 2024 expectations. We talk about the starting quarterback. Lots more to do. He is the voice of the James Madison Dukes. He's Dave Riggert on Locked On Sunbelt. We're talking to Dave Riggert from the James Madison Dukes, continuing our feature voices of the Sunbelt, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, I always like to ask, and I'm so disappointed I didn't get to pester all the coaches at Sunbelt Media Day. Who is the JMU starting quarterback?
Well, I don't think we'll probably find out until maybe a day or two before they play Charlotte in the opener on August 31st, maybe the day of the game. I don't know. I think the edge probably goes to Dylan Morris. Obviously, he comes in. You don't bring in a transfer that has 1 year left unless you think that guy's going to be the starter. Now, he certainly can get beat out. And Alonzo Barnett, I'm going to talk about Alonzo in a second. But Dylan has come in, and he's taken most of the first-team reps. He did in the spring. Didn't even play a ton in the spring game just to preserve him. But he's a guy that started games at Washington in the Pac-12 before Michael Penix got there. He earned all conference honors. Yeah, he earned all conference honors in a shortened season back in 21. And then obviously a new staff and Michael Penix comes in and does what he does the last 2 years. But then he learned from him. And he was a guy that he's a Washington guy from Walla Walla, Washington. And he's a guy that he's been there, and that was his dream school. He got a job. He got the job early in his career, but then had to sit and watch. But they played for a national championship a year ago. But he wanted a kind of a fresh start and a place where he could kind of take over. And the one thing that I've learned is he is very intelligent. He's always going to get them into the right play. He's been around the game. You can tell it's much different from him, who's been in the game for 5 or 6 years. He's going to get him in the right play, make the right throw. But Alonzo Barnett, talking with Dean Kennedy, the offensive coordinator, he said Alonzo Barnett, who, for folks that don't remember, he started game one last year. He won the job as a redshirt freshman last year in front of Jordan McLeod. So he had a tremendous fall camp last year, won the starting job, did not play well. Jordan McLeod then took off. He came in and was ready to go and took off and became the Sun Belt Player of the Year. So Alonzo was behind him, and even at one point last year, he dropped to the third-team quarterback. Well, I think the coaching change was probably best for him. I think he needed a fresh start and maybe some new eyes on him, some new voices that he could hear. And he said he never wanted to transfer. He was unproven. He wanted to prove himself here. He loves it here. And Dean Kennedy told me he has made the biggest progress from spring to fall of any player on the roster. So at the quarterback spot, that's a big deal. And he looks like he's in a much different spot right now, mentally, physically. He looks very good. He's been very impressive throughout fall camp. So I think he's pushing Dylan Morris. I think Dylan's probably the guy that is ultimately the front runner, but who knows? And again, both guys are getting a lot of reps just because of how they structure practice. But Alonzo Barnett's had a big transformation from last year to this year. And who knows? We'll see what happens with Alonzo as this moves forward.
Well, I'm sure Bob Chesney suggested, look, the chances of going through a whole entire season without a quarterback getting hurt or banged up, like I guess Jordan didn't last year, probably played most of the snaps once he took over. Same thing with Joey Aguilar. Aguilar at App State wasn't a starter. He came in 6 plays into the game, and he took off and is your newcomer of the year. Cajuns haven't been able to have a healthy quarterback since Levi Lewis for the season. So Alonzo's just – Bob Chesney's going to be like, get better and be ready because the time's coming. Someone's going to take an ankle, a concussion. Something's going to happen where he's going to have to get in play. Last year, Chandler Fields had to come in when Zion Chris broke his leg, and he completed a 3rd and 14. You got to be ready.
You got to be ready. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And I
That's
think
right.
that's
Yeah,
the
be
message.
ready so you don't have to get ready. I had someone.
That's the message to most of these guys that are just one play away. So the one thing I also noticed on this team, and not just at quarterback, but I feel like this team has a lot more depth, even than last year's team that won 11 games. And some of the players that were on that team last year feel like there is more depth. So I think the coaching staff, with all the transfers they brought in, they were very methodical on how they put the roster together, so they had depth at different spots. And it's a much different team than even in the spring. They lacked depth at D-line and in the secondary during spring ball. So there were guys playing corner that were linebackers, and just because of necessity, because of the bodies they had. But they went in the portal after spring and got some depth at D-line and secondary. So I feel like they've got a lot of depth on this team, on both sides of the ball. Even though there's so many new guys, I think this is a pretty deep football team.
Talking to Dave Riggert, JMU Dukes, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day, voices of the Sunbelt. All right, so we got expectations for 2024, all right? And so, unfortunately, someone like John Summerall ruined it for every new coach coming into the Sunbelt, coming in, taking a losing, not program, but team that was losing the year before and has won back-to-back championships, did it more with defense his first year, more with offense his second year. What kind of team do we think we're going to get with Bob Chesney? And, the pressure is still there. They're not picked to win the division because everything's new, basically. And everyone goes with the same coach. I'm big, same coach, same quarterback. I'm picking them, generally speaking. So I don't have a problem, but JMU wasn't picked to were they picked second in the division? So what kind of, first of all, what kind of offense is Bob Chesney going to have? And what are your expectations for 2024?
I think they'll compete for the East Championship. I think they will. Just being able to watch this team during spring, it was, again, everything was brand new, but the transformation the team has made from the spring to the fall, heck, they didn't even know how practices were being run that well. They were kind of figuring out where they were going in the spring just because everything was so new. But they've been pretty crisp and clean so far through practices, and I know Coach Chesney's been happy with the progress. I think this team's really going to be good defensively, and that's something that we've said, obviously, the first 2 years in the Sun Belt at the FBS level. They've been one of the best defenses, not only in the Sun Belt, but in the country as far as stopping the run. I think they're going to be very similar. Now, obviously, they've only got 2 starters back from last year's team. So it's going to be a much different football team. But they brought in a guy like Jacob Dobbs, who is one of the best ever at Holy Cross, and he knows Coach Chesney in this system. They brought in some edge rushers that I think will be pretty impressive with Eric O'Neill. Kyrie Mans came from Colorado. He's a guy that I think is going to jump on people's list early on. Emmanuel Bush is a guy that transferred from Marshall 2 years ago, and he has turned into a big-time leader on this football team. And then, as I mentioned, they've added some depth in the secondary. So I think defensive, they've looked very impressive throughout camp. So I don't know. It's a little bit different defense, but it's going to be pretty similar to what they ran in the past. Very aggressive. I think they'll get after the quarterback. They'll try and, again, cause turnovers. So I think defensively, they're going to lean their hat on that probably early in the season. The offense was a little bit behind early in fall camp, but they've caught up, and they've been much better here the last week of camp. And I think it's going to be very multiple. All the receivers are talking how they're playing different positions. It's not you're in the slot, you're outside, you're a flanker. No, all the receivers are playing all 3 spots or 4 spots. They've got a deep tight end room. I really like their running back room with Iowa Day coming in from North Texas and George Pettaway coming in from North Carolina. So I think they've got some depth around the quarterback. And their offensive line is probably going to be the strength. They've got 3 starters back, plus some guys that have made starts in the past. A guy like Tyshawn Wyatt was a 3-year starter, then got hurt last year. He's trying to work his way back in. But then they bring in Jesse Ramil in the left tackle spot, Pat McMurtry from Holy Cross at right tackle. So they have over 200 games started combined with the 5 guys that they're rolling with right now, plus some depth behind them. So I think the O-line, that'll obviously be a huge benefit for this team. I think they're going to run the football and be able to kind of lean on that offensive line early. But I expect this team to compete for an East championship. I really do. I think they have that ability, and I think they've got that talent on this roster, having now been through it a couple of years to see kind of what they need in the Sun Belt. I think this team can compete with App State and others for the Sun Belt East to play for a championship. And again, this team would have played for a championship the last 2 years. They would have played Troy in the championship game had they been eligible, but they weren't eligible. And those expectations are still there. That they kind of, I think they probably outkicked their coverage the first 2 years of the Sun Belt to be able to do what they did with the record that they had and win the East back-to-back years, just not be able to play for the Sun Belt championship. But I think that is the standard, and that will always be the standard, no matter what, no matter who's coaching, who's playing at JMU. they expect to play for a Sun Belt championship, and I think they'll compete for that.
Now, I happen to think, the Sun Belt team is going to be right there to possibly be in the playoff, in the 12-team playoff. And some of these teams, Texas State gets UTSA and then Arizona State. App State gets Clemson and ECU, and later on Liberty. JMU gets Carolina. I mean, it can be a very big September, kind of setting the tone for the season moving forward that the Sun Belt wants to be included in the playoff.
Absolutely. We've seen that in the past. Again, when App went down to Texas A&M and knocked off the Aggies, JMU last year goes to Virginia and beats them. Yeah. So we saw that a lot. Marshall beat Notre Dame a couple of years ago. So we've seen that these first couple of years of this new 14-team Sun Belt, that in September you can start to turn some heads. And that's why most of the talking heads all over the country are saying the Sun Belt probably the best group of five in the land. And I agree. I think it is. And I'm sure you do as well. And I think hopefully we can get some marquee wins as a league to kind of turn some heads, to make the committee look and be like, okay, the Sun Belt might deserve a spot. Whoever that champion is, they might deserve a spot. So I think if there can be some big wins early in the season against some of the Power 4 teams, I guess, that would be tremendous for this league, because they've done it the last 2 or 3, however many years that they've been rolling, especially the last couple of years. There have been some big wins here in the Sun Belt in non-conference play. So it could be a big September if they get some ones. If JMU can go down to Carolina and beat Mac Brown on that team, look out, because honestly, their win at Virginia last year, that kind of jump-started the 11-win season. That was gave them a ton of confidence.
Wasn't that a come-from-ahead victory?
They were
blow that one.
They were down. They were up 17-3, and then they were down by 11 when a lightning strike halted the game for about an hour and 15 minutes, and they scored the last 12 points of the game to win it in the fourth quarter. Then they go to Troy the next week off of that momentum and get a win down there. So early season success against teams that you're not supposed to beat, quote unquote, can lead to a lot of confidence and some wins down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. He's Dave Riggert, hopping on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day from the James Madison Dukes. Really appreciate your time, Dave. Continued success, because it's all on you. You get there, and all of a sudden they're winning left and right. Really appreciate your time, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Anytime.